Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question yesterday, and I'll flip it in here, and they wanted to know, are there benefits to mixing rep ranges in the same training session? Meaning, could they do a bunch of heavy bench press and do a bunch of high rep flies right behind it to help their chest grow better to get the best of both worlds? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little crafting, and let's talk about this. All right, good question. And for people who aren't up to speed with all the current training methodologies out there, that might sound like a good question, because it would be, and it has been tried. It's been experimented with a lot in the past. Cliff notes for those who don't like the longer videos. No, absolutely not. It's not the most efficient way to train. It's not the fastest way to get results. Generally, you want to split rep ranges into different days. Most of the top experts agree, whether it's strength and conditioning coaches or PhDs in physiology and exercise science. They usually agree that you need to split those rep ranges up. That's why we have things like concurrent training and undulating periodization. You will get faster, better results if you do it that way. So, those who want a little more detail, what we generally find, and I think Dr. Mike Israetel explained this best. For those who don't know who he is, he's a professor of kinesiology who competes in both bodybuilding and, I believe, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So he trains in a couple of different endeavors. In addition to being a professor, he understands these things pretty well. So most of you guys out there can relate to him no matter what your goals are. Some of you are athletes, some of you are bodybuilders, some of you just want to get into shape, so you should be able to relate to him because he does a lot of everything. Again, one of those hybrid athletes. He explained it best. The way I saw him explain it was that basically, no, you reduce recovery in the different energy systems, and it makes you train each muscle group or movement further apart as a result of it. Because basically, if you spend one whole workout focusing on more peak strength and power and training with lower reps, 5 or less, that what ends up happening, you don't accumulate a lot of metabolic fatigue, but you do accumulate peripheral nervous system fatigue. And what happens is that you lose your ability to produce peak strength for a little while, particularly in those movements or those parts of the body. And it can take a few days for that to recover again, meaning you're not going to come in and do 3 sets of 5 with close to your 5 rep max 2-3 days in a row for the same body part. In fact, you might find once you're out of the novice phase that you can't even do that 3 times a week. You actually need to reduce that down to either twice a week, or you need to have a lighter day when you're working with lower rep ranges for any sort of volume. But what you find is that your higher rep strength doesn't regress. So if you've done only the lower reps, you haven't accumulated metabolic fatigue that you need to recover from. You've mostly fatigued your peripheral nervous system and more of your maximum strength. You've accumulated some metabolic fatigue, but not so much that you can't recover from it in a couple of days. Which means you could come back 48 hours later and train the same body parts with higher reps with no loss of performance, because you're not hitting peak sets. You're not hitting really, really heavy sets, so you don't need that maximum strength. And then you can accumulate metabolic fatigue, which again, another pathway to building muscles. And then conversely, on those days, because you haven't fatigued the peripheral nervous system, you've only built up metabolites, which take a little while to clear. You can come back a couple days later and hit heavy sets again with no loss of performance. And that's the main thing. You need to be getting stronger in your training. If you're not improving. You're not going to grow from it. You're not going to get adaptations if you're not improving your performance in the weight room. So that's the whole point, is recovering these different performance aspects so that you can be stronger. But what he also pointed out is that what ends up happening is when you mix them, let's say you come in and you do 2 heavy sets on your bench press, and then behind it you do 2 really high rep sets of like 12 reps to failure. You've now fatigued the peripheral nervous system, which means your peak strength is going to be gone for a couple days, 2 or 3 days, and you've built up metabolites, which gives you all this metabolic fatigue, which could also take 3 days or so to recover from. So 2 or 3 days later, you're not going to be able to perform optimally on either a heavy bench press or a high rep bench press. So therefore, you can't train the exercise again as often. You might have to go 5 days, 6 days before you can train it optimally again. You grow less, because we know that training frequency for drug-free lifters is actually probably more important than overall volume for their size and strength. So by doing that, you essentially reduce how often you can train that lift and that body part. You get less results. So that's why systems like concurrent training and undulating periodization have become so popular with in-season athletes. They've become so popular with natural bodybuilders, actually. Guys who are trying to get big and compete in those endeavors completely drug-free. A lot of them are really finding concurrent style training like that to be fantastic, where they rotate through different rep ranges on different days. And sometimes they're rotating through as many as 3 different ones at any given time. So they might actually be having 3 to 5 rep days. They might have 8 to 10 rep days, and then they have 12 to 15 rep days. All separate on separate days rotated through for a given body part or a given exercise. And what you're finding is that because they're separating those rep ranges out that way, you're finding a lot of the drug-free guys are getting better results than they were getting using other systems in the past, because it allows for a lot higher training frequency for a body part and higher training frequency on each exercise. And if you're drug-free, that's worth a lot. And because you're training all the different systems concurrently at the same time, you're generally improving on all of them at the same time. So undulating style periodization and concurrent training is doing really, really well these days. And I'm not saying it's for everyone. I generally don't like it for off-season athletes. I'm a big fan of linear periodization. But for people who are wanting to train the different rep ranges for whatever reason, whether you're in season, whether you're just trying to grow, you want to be as big and as strong as possible at any given time without having to rotate things through blocks, I can see it being valuable. And so it is becoming very, very popular for that reason. And a lot of top experts out there are recommending concurrent style training like that. But you have to remember, all the experts who are recommending it are recommending that you split the days up on the rep ranges for the reasons I broke down earlier. Now, what people also need to remember, a lot of people say, why do we need all this complexity? Shut up and lift. Well, because some people are trying to hit maximum gains. And I always tell people, most of you probably don't need to worry about maximum gains. Some of you can just pick a training style that you enjoy, that's progressive, that makes you happy. And if you stick it out for 3 or 5 years, you'll probably make most of the gains you're going to make anyways. So do what you enjoy. But if people are really in any sort of serious competitive endeavor where that last ounce of muscle actually matters, that last half pound of muscle they might make in a year could make or break their competitive endeavors, then they need to seriously consider this sort of complexity in their training. But for people who are just general fitness enthusiasts, do you really care if you gain an extra 2 or 3 ounces of muscle per year? Is it that big of a deal to you? Maybe, maybe not. I can't tell you what your priorities are, but if it is what you're trying to do and you really do care about that, yeah, you need to look into these sort of things. But if you don't, and you're just training to get bigger at whatever rate, you just want to get stronger and you want to do training you enjoy and you like doing all rep ranges and you want to mix them on the same days, by all means do so. Just remember that it's not ideal, but what people also need to remember is that consistency trumps ideal any day of the week anyways. So if you enjoy it more and you're going to be more consistent with it over the next 5 years, then, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. But that's ultimately what it comes down to. And a lot of people need to remember, we have these talks and these conversations about what's ideal, what the science says, what the experts say, but oftentimes when we're looking at what's ideal here, we're not looking at, is it really going to be significant to everybody? Meaning, if you just don't enjoy a certain level of complexity, is a 1% better result really worth it to you? Same thing when it comes to things like nutrient timing and stuff for meals. We talk a lot about nutrient timing. It's one of those things that so many experts talk about, so many articles are written on, but ultimately, when we talk about meal timing and stuff for athletic performance, recovery, or growth, you're talking about, at best, in the best case of scenarios, a 1% advantage. To most of you out there, you're not going to notice a 1% difference or a 1% performance change over the next year just by looking at the scale, looking at the mirror, looking at the weights on the bar. The only people who are really going to notice that 1% edge are going to be people who are in a serious competitive endeavor, because sometimes a 1% advantage means the difference between first place and 17th place. And so competitors of any type, they're always looking for that edge. But what people need to remember with questions like this, yes, you will probably gain slightly slower. Slightly slower, 0.5%, 1%, 3%. It's hard to say how much if you mix rep ranges in the same workout instead of doing an undulating style training. But what you have to ask yourself is, do you really care that much? And that's the real question. People tend to spend too much time focusing on small minutia that matters less than 1%, and oftentimes not enough time worrying about the big things that actually might improve their gains 50% or 30% or something. It's really funny. A lot of people worry about the wrong things too much, and they sometimes forget to focus on the basics. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.